Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I'm delighted to be here with you.
And I'm delighted to sit here and talk to Tim, who has been in company of the giants.
Well, I'm happy to be here too. But
Tell me something about Virginia. How was it? Tall and so magical.
She's very tall, and I remember one time she was doing a kind of a program, a training, and there was a very short woman that she was talking to. And so she arranged it, just kind of maneuvered her body a little bit so the other young woman she was talking to was standing on a stair and she wasn't, so they could be more in rapport with eye-to-eye level. And
I think she knows to pick that up so fast.
Well, she learned it somehow. As what she told us was, well, you know, when Bandler and Grinder modeled her, I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but Bandler kind of signed on to be her sound guy on a program doing in Oregon with a group of people. So he was the way John Grinder described it. Bandler had Virginia in this ear and Pink Floyd in that ear, and he was kind of moving back. But as the story goes, Richard was watching Virginia Satir working, and she would do something and then invite one of the students to come and do the process. So, and what sometimes the way she trained anyway, was she would do something and then she'd have a student come down and do it, and then she'd give the student feedback. And she had several students try this and they all failed. And finally, Richard put his he wasn't even one of the students. He took his headphones off and he went out, and then Richard Bandler, after they had already modeled Fritz Perls, who was a developer of Gestalt therapy, he was wanting to model one of the other geniuses. And of course, Virginia Satir had I think a few more moves than Fritz Perls had. She's very sophisticated in a very loving, warm way. I was lucky because I got to work with her both before I was trained in NLP and afterwards, and I had some remarkable experiences with her. But
wow, this is something incredible that you're bringing to the field.
Well, it was lucky for me. I never got to actually meet Milton. But I did get to work with Virginia, both, as I said before.
She's the mom of systemic constellation.
Yeah, she was a very incredibly warm and gentle person who knew all kinds of stuff that was amazing. And gentle person, but also very powerful. I think very direct, but in a way that made you feel good about yourself anyway. I mean, you can be brutally honest, and you know, sometimes Richard and John have been brutally honest, and it can devastate people because those are powerful guys. But she never devastated anybody, as far as I could tell. But you know, Milton Erickson is often credited with this idea of utilization, which is what made his hypnosis different. Was he would be, for example, if I were Milton working with you, I'd be observing your eyes, where they go, your blinking, your head tilt, and I would be responding to all of that in my language. And Virginia did the same thing, but in kind of a different way. And often at the end of a piece of work, she'd say, if she were working with you, she'd say, Anil, I know you've made this change.
In a very kind and different way.
And the way I know you've made this change is I can see the moisture in your eyes have changed. Your skin color is getting more robust and full, and you'd look less. Your posture is relaxed. So she was a great observer of, and I think one of the great gifts that we got in NLP that Richard Bandler and John Grinder began to really identify was the physiology and the changes in physiology and the changes of state. And Virginia was also a master at that. She also gave a lot of the presuppositions, you know. No one is broken is one. Another one is everybody tries to do the best they possibly can.
Yeah. I think to begin with, Virginia was up for herself being model, but after that, I think she held and she had reservations of Bandler and Grinder modeling her, I think.
Well, she did. She, what she said was,
she was not up for it.
Said with the problem that she kept saying is that, you know, with the kind of things they're modeling from her and from Milton Erickson and others, were very powerful. And she said, with power comes responsibility. And she wanted to make sure whoever learned these skills used them in an ethical and responsible and ecological way. And I think she's very worried that, you know, people could be manipulated.
I think it is a big responsibility.
She was very careful to be ecological. And she was worried that somebody could misuse them.
Okay.
And so, anyway, so Virginia was, very concerned that NLP could take her, some of the powerful things that she did and misuse them. She also thought, and so after John and Richard modeled her, she started being more self-aware, and it got in her way.
Oh.
And what she told us later was, she said, you know, I knew I was doing a lot of the things Richard and John said in my right brain kind of way, but, you know, I didn't have it as explicitly. So she knew what she was doing. She was, and she was brilliant. So, but also a wonderful model for being a kind and loving soul.
Terrific, I think, terrific.
Yeah.
Tell me something really funny or something playful with your experiences with Virginia.
Playful with Virginia. I've got one of the things Virginia did when I first met her. She had a group of people called the Avanta Network, and they were mostly social workers and people that would, you know, psychotherapists that would work with her. And she did a kind of a team building for our Department of Social Services, where I was employed right after graduate school. And I was the trainer there. And I got really lucky because they were looking for some venues to let Virginia try out some of her new ideas. I said, well, jackpot, because we've got a lot of employees and I can set it up. But anyway, she did a team building for our office. And one of the guys in the group was he was a good guy, but he tended to speak for the whole group. And he would say, he would start making comments like, we think this. And of course, Virginia goes, this guy's mind reading. And of course, she's celebrating everybody else, and everybody didn't think that. So she had this guy stand on a table whenever he started to do that. And she'd say, okay, well, since you know everything, you should stand on the table. But she did it in a very cute and humorous way. So he really got the message of what he was doing. But it was done in such a playful way, he wasn't offended. And the group wasn't, you know, sometimes if you're not careful with that kind of thing, you could make the group nervous about being open. But the way she did it was so cute and fun that he was okay with that. So that was so she wasn't afraid to do those kind of extreme things sometimes to make a point. And if you do it playfully enough, you can get away with an awful lot.
Yes.
He said, you're mind reading, stop that. Then she would have gotten pushback and resistance. But
and I think in many ways, getting the client or the participant to take responsibility of their communication changes a lot of things in their system. Did you know at that time when you were with Virginia that this is going to be a long journey of creating a history? From there, you meet Bandler, Grinder, Robert, and you continue to create something which the world will always remember.
No, because when I met Virginia the first time, I hadn't heard of NLP yet. I learned about NLP.
Was it there at that time? Did it happen at that time? Was the term coined at that time?
I don't think term was there quite yet then. Let's see.
Yeah.
It might have been, nah, it was before it got coined. Because it would have been in 76 or 7. But then
Yeah.
I'm not sure when it got coined. When I first heard of NLP, it was in 1978.
Yeah, I think around that time, maybe a year or two before that.
Maybe so, yeah, probably a year or two before then. I had a business partner named Susie Smith, who I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Susie and I worked together for many years, and we had an NLP Institute that we ran together. And she and I were back in those early days. I just out of graduate school, and we were working with stress. And so she and I did a stress training for a group of health faculty at the University of Utah. And
Oh, yeah.
a woman came up, we were teaching them how to reduce stress, but a woman came up on break and said, "You're visual." And I go, "Oh yeah, how do you know that?"
Yeah, you're very visual.
She said,
and for everyone seeing that, you should know, I mean, you obviously know if you're doing NLP, every time you see Tim going up here and up here, that's visual. And Tim is implicitly and explicitly visual.
Yeah, probably so. But we all do all of those senses. We don't,
yeah.
Anyway, this woman said, you're very visual. And I said, well, how do you know that? And I went, how do you know that? She gave me some papers. And these were unpublished papers that Robert Dilts had written when he was a student of Richard and John's.
John Grinder, yeah.
One of the things in there was the happy face, where it showed the eye
the standard, yeah.
And I got fascinated with that. And I'd go and I'd try them with Susie, and they didn't work. But I could see a pattern there. And I realized she's one of the very few people that are reversed.
The right hand, left hand.
Yeah, I've probably done more work with eye movements than anybody in the field, as far as I know. Do a lot of work with that. And very few people are actually reversed, but she was one of the few that was. So.
Probably that happy face was the beginning of all the emoticons which we see nowadays, maybe.
Yeah, the little, do you know where that came from? The happy face.
Who made that? Where did that come from?
The eye movements came from.
Where did that come from?
Well, Robert Dilts was taking a beginning class in linguistics with John Grinder at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And John gave the class an assignment, a linguistic assignment. And he said, find something in the world that doesn't have a name.
Yeah, find something that doesn't have a name.
And give it a name. And once you give it a name, notice what you learn about it. And Robert didn't quite understand the assignment. So at the end of the class, he went up and said, well, John, I don't really get the assignment. And then he said his eyes kind of moved off. And John said, like that, you just moved your eyes. That doesn't have a name. Give it a name and find out what you can discover. So Robert goes out and discovers that there's a lot of patterns with these eyes. So he brings that back to Bandler and Grinder, and they, of course, began to really notice the eye movements.
Yeah.
And the neurology.
That's the beginning. Yeah.
That was the beginning of that. So it's always so interesting where these things come from. Yeah. Well, and what's so amazing to me is that, Virginia did amazing things, and Milton Erickson did incredible things, and so did Fritz Perls, but they didn't have even the basic skills that a practitioner has. I mean, Milton Erickson really had a 6-step reframe. None of them explicitly knew about submodalities. So,
but I think they were using this unconsciously, because I remember hearing Virginia or Milton saying that, have you noticed how your face is flushed, or how your, or your eyes have shrunk?
They did the calibration very consciously.
Yeah, very intuitive.
They didn't know things like the eye accessing cues, and they didn't know that if you went, they would have used something like this where somebody's maybe pointing and being visual. They would have known that. they would have unconsciously gotten predicates. You know, when people say, I see what you're, you know, I can see what you're trying to show me with the, they would get that probably less consciously, but they'd get it because they would tend to backtrack what you said.
Yeah, and that's very intuitively they would do that.
Yeah, if you read Milton Erickson or Virginia Satir, one of the things that strikes you, you don't hear it so much when you're first learning NLP, but if you read the transcripts, you'll see that, you know, often they would kind of backtrack every sentence. So somebody say, I'm feeling really blue, and they say, oh, so you're feeling really blue. You know, it's kind of like.
That's pacing, constant pacing, I think.
Constant pacing, pace and lead, pace and lead.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think that's under-taught in our field of NLP.
Yeah.
Because if you start leading without pacing,
gone.
You don't get very far, you know, as you know.
Yeah. What do you remember of Dick?
What I remember about him was he was so present.
Yeah.
I don't remember him ever looking disassociated, you know. He was always kind of like absorbing things, and he was a quick study. He got things really fast, and I think he's just a really bright guy. And he reminded me kind of like there's a genuineness about him, something you trust, and so I think he had those same kind of qualities. I think Virginia had a lot of those too, where you feel safe in their presence.
Oh, true that. True that. And tell me, how have you stepped on to the NLP, and what have you seen the subject change in your presence over the last so many years, 40 years?
What have I seen change?
Yeah.
No, well, a lot of things have changed because our knowledge keeps growing and growing and growing. The thing about NLP, it's a living field. It's not like, oh, here's that information. And sometimes people try to, you know, get it in and say, well, it's a psychotherapy. That's just an application. It's not a thing. NLP is really modeling, and there's a huge trail of techniques that have come from modeling. But there's, you know, when I first got into NLP, you know, somebody said in the old books, there's not a lot on how do you work with beliefs. And I go, well, we didn't always have that, you know, in NLP. It kind of grew out of behaviors and sort of into capabilities. And I remember what struck me at one point, it was actually 1985, but Robert Dilts had worked with his mom who had a reoccurrence of breast cancer.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. That's a powerful one.
But when he did that, he, afterwards, people said, what'd you do with your mom? Because she got better. And so he decided to do basically what he did with her is he said he did everything he knew how to do with NLP. And they basically would just take time off to eat or sleep. But people were wanting to know. So he did a seminar. And at the seminar, there was a woman asked him, what would you do with allergies? And he said, I don't really know. But there was a guy in the program that was a medical researcher from the World Health Organization. And he made an offhand comment like, allergies are like a phobia of the immune system. They're like an overreaction. And so
that's a line we use even today.
Robert goes, phobia. We've got a phobia technique. We had the old original phobia technique. But what struck me about that was what's important is finding the right questions to ask.
Yes.
And I think so often we don't ask the question, so we don't look for the answer. Because NLP is the structure of experience, the structure of subjective experience, and every subjective experience has some kind of structure to it.
Structure, yeah.
So
and it's a structure to make those structures.
Yes, and if we find the patterns, then we can start doing all kinds of things with it. So I think what's made NLP very strong is identifying the right questions. And it's in all kinds of fields. You know, we've modeled people in sales and people who are in consulting and people who are wine tasters.
Yeah. And talking of phobia, that one sentence that stays with me, what Dick said is, it's the panic of the immune system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and how we can edit and model something new and take illness and make it into wellness is the beauty. You've taken NLP in the field of health.
Yeah, it's been
where it began from something very cognitive in 1970 and 1980, when everybody was talking of the cognitive part of NLP, of how you think and what's the quality of what you think. It's come to field and now to the spirit end. Tell me more about the health application.
We started with stress and meditation and those kind of things. And then we were learning NLP, and we decided after we started applying basically all the NLP we were learning to health issues. So somebody would have a health issue and we would work with them, and sometimes we'd see some results that were pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And like, wow, how did that happen? Somebody had migraines, for years, and they'd have to go lay down in bed at least once a month for a day or two. Do a 6-step reframe and they don't get them anymore, those kind of things. Yeah. So it was pretty exciting. And so often I think when people think of health, they think of it as like physical health. They think of it's your body, what are you doing with NLP and that? And it's your body and mind are the same thing as far as I can tell. So health is just a kind of content. So if you came to me that I'm nervous when I speak in front of a group, I would always do the same thing. I'd say, so what's going on now? Tell me about it. What's your present state? What is it you want instead? And get the well-formedness conditions. Contrast the two, and then do whatever NLP can do to close that. But health works exactly the same way. And so, your thinking has a huge influence on your physiology. Milton Erickson, or not Milton Erickson, but Deepak Chopra, who's one of my kind of philosophical mentors. I've been to programs with him over the years. He says your immune system is always eavesdropping on your self-dialogue.
Yeah.
So, which I think is
phenomenal.
Very powerful.
I think to say that the words, the self-talk, thoughts, we think in language, so the impact of language creates that emotion, the feeling, and feeling decides whether healing is coming up or not.
Yeah, exactly. And you get the feeling, for example, if you have certain feelings like regret or resentment or guilt, then your body produces, it's associated with body chemistry like cortisol. Cortisol is associated with a number of
cells and
including cancer. So
true.
If you change a belief and you quit feeling resentful, then you're creating a different environment for things to happen in. Sometimes you could take cancer cells out of a person and you put them in a petri dish, and sometimes they'll revert to normal cells. So what that's telling us is cancer
it's the environment,
cancer in an environment like a body, you put it in another environment, that it's not being supported as cancer anymore.
Yeah, Tim, so, that is so magnificent, that one sentence saying that the cancer is not in the cell, it's in the environment that you've put it.
Well, or the environment that you are provides the soil for that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like.
So I think to everybody listening, that one sentence can be such a huge reframe if they understand that it's not the cells that are responsible for degenerating, it's the thoughts and the beliefs that you're installing in them at all time.
And that has a lot to do with it. Now, we're a complex system, so there are a lot of impacts. So if somebody has cancer, it's not just because of their beliefs necessarily. It might be because they're smoking and they live in a polluted city and they eat poorly but beliefs often are one of the fundamental things that you need to help people change. Beliefs and conflicts.
Yeah, and at all levels.
At all levels, yeah. Everything from identity down to some
the
behavior.
Environment, yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't everything that we do today in NLP the new code?
Well, I think it's been, well, John Grinder started calling it the new code.
Yeah,
When
because
Richard
of the conflict.
he and John
Yeah,
Bandler and
separate.
Grinder,
Yeah,
they made a series of agreements, but Richard kind of more coined the name NLP. So John was going to go, okay, well, I have the new code of NLP.
New code. Yeah, but isn't all of that same today?
Yeah, so the presupposition of new code is that here's the new code, that's the old code, you know.
Yeah.
My sense is that Richard and John both made incredible contributions. They're both true geniuses.
True. Oh, true.
Richard,
They are.
Richard made all kinds of amazing observations that no one else, I mean, he was seeing things and noticing things nobody else really noticed.
Yeah.
But
The way he
really
documented it. Yeah.
didn't have the way to really codify it in a way that could be duplicated.
Yeah.
When John got together, John had a way, John said, you know, I think I could put this together in a way that we can really make it useful. So as a team, they were amazing.
Yeah, they were.
Totally different kind of people. Richard's a bombastic, tough guy kind of guy, and John is a very powerful guy, but more the CIA ex-officer.
Oh, yeah. And I like the metaphor where they say that, I think it was Judy who said this, the one is a raging sea and the other is the shore.
Yeah, maybe so. Good way to put it.
Yeah,
but
I think it's Judy. Yeah.
For I think all the people listening who are mostly NLP people, that, you know, NLP didn't end with Richard and John.
Oh, no.
Discoveries. So many of the discoveries, I mean, think of dynamic spin release and re-imprinting and all these.
There's a lot that you brought to the field. There's a lot that Robert, I think it grew from there into so many generative, collaborative approaches.
And I think what Richard and John did was make possible a lot of other discoveries too.
Yes.
Were, you know, a lot of times they weren't the easiest people to get along with, and it's
you bet.
You take geniuses, and they're not all like Virginia Satir.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That makes. Tell me, how important is the use of metaphors in NLP? How much do you consciously use metaphors? And
that reminds me of a story.
There you go. I'd like to hear that.
Well, we think in metaphors.
Yeah.
We think in our stories, and our storylines become our metaphor. How to identify and change our unconscious stories. And often we will have an experience, we start making up a narrative about it, and then that story becomes a cluster of beliefs that we operate from. And until you make that conscious, you're stuck with it. And so I think it's really important that you have the understanding of how you can step back and go meta to yourself and see what your own metaphors are.
Yeah.
But often metaphors are what sneaks something in. Metaphors are very important. They guide your life. People move in metaphors. You know,
There's also a psychogeography to metaphors when they relate to it, a preferred direction to it, and how it's malleable and how it can melt.
Yeah, there are a lot of sort of physiological metaphors, if that's what you mean. So we have, often people will really pay attention to the gestures that people use, for example. And so often I think we're not paying attention to it. If I got this problem, I'm showing you my inner submodalities right now.
Yeah.
So if you say, what's there? Yeah. Sometimes, oh, or become that. What are you when you become that? Those kind of things, you can make a lot of discoveries. But or say things like, man, it's like I've been living in this box. When we talk to people about how successful they can become, often they'll have a ceiling. And without that ceiling, it becomes unreal. And so once it's and depending on their beliefs, so you can pull that ceiling down sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like then they've got a new ceiling, a new possibility. But yeah, I think metaphors are super important. Milton used to work a lot with metaphors. Go ahead.
So from all the way from there, the world that we live in is changing so much and so fast. And I think it's a new world coming in. Like this is mythic reality in many ways, as Judy would call it. What skills in the current time you think is so essential, that one thing that one can really hold on to this uncertain times? So
one of the things I'd like to share is that right now when we've got this coronavirus, and you know, probably not the last one. I think with global climate change, we're going to have all these kind of physical challenges that we haven't.
Do you feel the worst is yet to come?
Yeah, exactly. And so one thing you can do with the pandemic going on is strengthen your immune system as best you can.
Tim, I have heard that there is a process of gratitude that you bring to strengthen the.
So let me give a couple of facts about gratitude first that people may not know. One is that one of the things I've discovered body chemistry wise, when you're in a state of gratitude, even for a few minutes, it can impact your immune system for up to 6 hours.
Wow.
There's a part of your immune system called IgA, and it's one of the front
immunoglobulin.
Yes, exactly. And it's one of the things that is one of the front lines in, you know, dealing with foreign invaders like viruses. And so if you keep your IgA high, then, or higher, you're more likely to deal effectively with germs and things that you're coming in contact with. Another thing about gratitude that I want to share is, Chris, my wife and I used to live in the Santa Cruz Mountains. We lived down the street from a place in the Redwood Forest, down the street from a place called HeartMath, HeartMath, HeartMath Institute. They've studied the heart and the brain and how all of this entrains. One of the things they found is your heart actually produces more bioelectricity than your brain, even though your brain uses more oxygen. And they've been able to measure that bioelectricity out from your body as far as 3 meters out.
Wow.
But it depends on your state. So if you're in a grouchy, grumbly, complaining state, they can. But if you're in a state of love,
it opens up.
Feeling the love, they can feel it way out. But even further than love is a state of gratitude and appreciation. Wow. And if you think about the state of gratitude, it's a state of having already received something. So when you think of people that pray, a very powerful prayer is the thank you prayer. And the thank you prayer is the presupposition you've already got it. So if you maintain a state of gratitude, it can do some very powerful things. And one of the things we found is that virtually everybody that healed from something significant had a representation of what it would be like when they had gotten better and they healed. And you'd hear things in the language when you're modeling it like, well, as soon as I get over this, I'm going to go do X. As soon as I get through this, then I'm going to do these other things that I've wanted to do. As soon as I get beyond this. So we have a lot of ways of saying it, but they all apply. We're going to get over it, and then it'll be a new way of being. So when you say a gratitude kind of, when you're in a state of gratitude, it's a state of having already gotten something. Yeah. So maintaining a state of gratitude is a very powerful thing. And, but it's not just an idea, it's a whole mind-body state. Yeah. And most people, I think, you said a lot of the people that would be listening to this would be NLP practitioners. Yeah. And of course, one of the early things taught in almost every practitioner training is circle of excellence. Yeah. So a very powerful thing to do is a circle of gratitude. So I'm going to ask people just to try this. It'll take less than 2 minutes, but stand up for a minute. And
you want me to stand too?
Yeah, do it with me.
Okay. I'm going to do it with you.
Look down in front of your feet and see a circle there. And that could be your circle of gratitude. And get a sense of what color it is, what shape, what it looks like. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you to step into it. But before I do, I'm just going to ask you to find something in your life that you're very grateful for. Something that was very meaningful to you. Or I know that for you, Anil, your relationship with Dick could be something. So it could be something like somebody in your life that's been very special or is very special. It could be something you have that you're like health, you're in good health, that kind of thing. It could be some kind action that somebody took towards you. Take a moment and find something. And as you find it, just take a step forward and really be with that person or that experience and get a sense of how it feels in your body. If it were colored light, what would it be? And just let it grow. When you have a sense of that, just kind of step back and shake it off. And now take a step forward, back in your circle and test it. And if you've done that, well, you will begin to get that sense of gratitude back. And from this place of gratitude, this is a really good place to set some goals. So it's one of the ways you can use it. And then just step back. Now take your step of gratitude, after you step back, shrink your your circle of gratitude down to the size of a tiny little button and put it in your heart, and whenever you want, drop it down. But what I've discovered is if you practice with that, you can really create a powerful state of gratitude.
Yeah.
It can serve you in a lot of ways. What I found personally, and a lot of my students have, if they access a state of gratitude and then say their daily goals or a big goal, it's as though they've already achieved it, so they're going to start representing that as more of an expectation, and then you organize your behavior more to get it. So
I think these are small beauties, less than 2-3 minutes, but it suddenly centers, it actively centers, and it's a state of...
Yeah, of course, when we do a big training, we have a lot more complicated techniques too, but sometimes we need to remember the simple things in NLP because they're often the ones easy to do on a daily basis, and they don't cost anything. It takes 3 or 4 minutes or something like that. So anyway.
Thank you, Tim, for that experience. It always feels good to be led.
At least they can do.
Yeah. Where do you see NLP evolving in the coming 10 years, 15 years?
Well, I see NLP evolving in a number of different ways. One way is NLP is now, you see elements of NLP in virtually every communication field. It's not always identified as NLP, but you'll see it. And it's surprising how many people will come through our NLP trainings and go, oh, I learned something similar to this in my engineering training at the university. And you start talking to them, you go, oh, that's field isn't even related, but they've taken some part of NLP and made it. Even words from NLP are now common, framing and reframing.
Reframing, I've heard this. The people who don't even know,
So a lot of NLP is escaping out into the bigger world. The danger with that is that the techniques and tools and some of the understandings without the presuppositions
will only be lifeless.
Can be a little problematic. But I see NLP as, there's some NLP processes have been now well researched. There's over 300 studies in NLP that are positive.
True.
Or relate to NLP. So sometimes people say, well, it's not, NLP isn't evidence-based, but that's not true.
Oh, that's not true at all.
Very evidence-based, and if people take the time to look, they'll find that. So I think NLP is going to continue to grow and evolve, and The nice thing is, I know, Anil, you teach NLP, yes?
Yeah.
And you take a student and you're teaching them what you know. So when you learned NLP, you were learning it was down here. Now there's that much more knowledge.
Yeah.
They're getting here, and they, by the time
They
they've
would,
been
yeah.
as you and I have, their students are going to be starting from there, right? So,
and that's what we call, as always, standing on the shoulders of giants.
Well, and there's probably giants who are going to be standing on your shoulders and Robert's shoulders, a lot of shoulders.
Yeah. NLP has now moved into the space of coaching. How would you say this coaching is different? Because this word, I think, is overused or abused.
Well, coaching is about asking good questions. Coaching is not about putting your map on somebody else. NLP is very natural for coaching, I think.
Yeah.
But you're right. There are all kinds of people that call themselves a coach that they're really doing consulting.
Yeah. But that's a good demarcation. Consultation. Yeah.
Consultants are people with expertise, right?
Yeah.
So as a consultant, I go, okay, Anil, here's what you need to do to solve that.
Do it.
Coaches don't give advice like that.
Yeah.
No, in NLP coaching, I think what we have is distinctions and observations that don't exist out in the bigger field of coaching as much as they could.
Yeah.
We also have more explicit techniques, but with coaching, we're not just doing a bunch of techniques. We're always, it's that idea, present state, desired state, and doing what we can to help the person go from one side to the other.
Yeah.
And the most powerful tools for doing that, of course, are really listening and being present to somebody, asking really good questions, letting them discover for themselves.
And I think to pick out the meta programmings which they bring to the field, to present to them, like you say, backtrack that or paste that to them in ways that fits in their system.
Yes.
I think the foundation, the fundamentals of NLP is so key in coaching, of knowing what are the predicates that they're using or what's the language preference. And I think that's the edge which NLP has in many ways.
Definitely a huge edge. The whole idea of rapport is being able to match and pace. And even the idea of pacing and leading is, sometimes in coaching, you might need to confront somebody with what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I go, hey, as soon as I do something like that, you're going to have to resist it.
Yeah.
I can honor you first and then ask the question.
Yeah. Pacing is so important.
Then, yeah, it is.
What is that tool that you use regularly to be this calm, this oasis of strength? And I think you must have got this a lot, where people say, he's so calm, he's so...
I get that. I recommend everybody do that's. It's not exactly NLP, but it's a practice, is meditation. I do a daily practice of meditating twice a day, and I think that makes a huge difference. And of course, we all know about what the kind I do is transcendental meditation, which is incredibly well researched. So we know about that. But the other thing is that I think as NLPers, we always need to be working on ourselves. And I don't like to use myself as an example, but when I find something that isn't working in my life, I really try to use my NLP skills and change it. So I'll find something that's a behavior, a belief, or something a barrier. Then sometimes when I discover that, become conscious of it, I think that's a gift. Because until I'm aware of it, I can't change it. So
a constant self-calibration.
I think, and I think it's important to be consistently working with yourself.
Yeah.
So that you can have choice about the state of mind you're in. so you can be your best self. That being said, we never stop growing and evolving as far as I can tell.
Yeah. So what is your message going to be to the NLPers?
Well, the message I want to share is one that I think it's a way of being an NLP. And it's something kind of like Bandler says, something similar to this, but I think NLP is more of a state of mind and a state of, it's a way of thinking versus, a set of techniques or skills. I always cringe when somebody says, oh, NLP, that's a set of tools. Yeah. Well, that may be part of NLP, but NLP is really more of an attitude. It's wanting to discover things. It's going, how does that work? I remember when I was first learning NLP was with one of my teachers was Connie Ray Andreas.
Wow.
You may know.
Oh, yeah.
Andreas, who just died
so amazing. Ago. Yeah. You also learned with Steve, but was Steve also there when?
Oh, yeah. Steve was a...
You live closer to Colorado, right? Even right now?
Well, we both live in the Rocky Mountains, but they're about 500 miles away.
Oh.
But I was going to say something about Connie Ray, because it had a big impact on me. I was in my practitioner training, and one of the things she was teaching was that earliest version of 6-step reframing. And so she would ask her demonstration person a question like, okay, go inside and what's here? And the guy would go inside where? And she asked, he didn't get it. And I thought, I was a trainer already, but I would go, man, boy, I'd hate to be in her shoes. This is demonstration is going nowhere. And what she did is all of a sudden, after this didn't work, she went, wow, this is really interesting. Usually that works. Let's find out what's going on underneath that. It was this whole attitude of, oh, good, this isn't, if that isn't working, what else can we discover here? There's something more important. So I think that's the attitude that we want to have in NLP.
Curiosity.
So it's never getting it right, or doing it correctly, so much as it is, what can we discover here? What can we learn? I think it's good to learn the techniques as kind of a recipe the first time.
Yeah.
So it's a procedure, but then
break free from that. Yeah.
Free it up. So I think my main message would be playful with NLP.
Curiosity.
Wear your detective hat versus trying to get it right. The people I find that don't do well with NLP in the long run are people that try to get it correctly versus and do the recipes, and say, oh, that's the wrong way to do it, or that's the right way. It's instead finding out, hey, what's going to work here?
Yeah.
And mixing all your skills to make that happen. So if you wear that discovery frame, every interaction can be fun and interesting.
I like that, the discovery frame.
Yeah. Yeah, but it wouldn't be like that. It'd be more like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Tim. I'm grateful. Tell me something about Steve that you remember. Steve has a great impact on my NLP career.
Yeah, Steve was actually my first NLP teacher. When I first heard about NLP, I looked everywhere for some kind of training, and then finally I discovered NLP Colorado, which was a brand new training in the early 80s. So when I learned about it, I was getting it out into the 3 or 4 books that existed then. But then I discovered there's a training on this, and so I went to Colorado, and Steve was an incredible writer.
Oh yeah, he is
the best writer, I think, in the field of NLP in terms of readability, and he had a deep understanding of things. Trying to think of an interesting or funny story about him. Steve, one of the things Steve was able to do was he didn't like flattery. for one thing. And he had a funny sense of humor. He was always cracking he had always had jokes for people, but
yeah.
I kind of lost what I was going to say somehow. So I'm thinking of all this stuff about Steve. The thing about Steve that was, I think, one of his big strengths is he's very critical.
Yeah.
And he wanted something that, he was a scientist kind of thinker. He come out of chemistry before he went
Chemistry
into
background, yeah.
before he went into psychology. And so he wanted, it was important to him that things be kind of evidence-based. Sometimes when people say NLP is not evidence-based, it's what they're talking about are big mega $1 million studies with large control groups and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
NLP is critical. You can observe it. So if I go to the doctor and the doctor is going to look at my skin color, maybe my fingernails, will look in my throat and look in my ear with the light and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so, but there are things that the doctor can pick up with his or her 5 senses.
Yeah.
What can I see? Maybe the doctor even notices the smell. Somebody has diabetes and they're smelling your breath and all that stuff. So those are empirical signs. And I think Steve was very much about that kind of empirical sense. And the story in there that he said summed up NLP the best. And you probably know this story, and I don't know if all your listeners have.
Yeah.
But back in the late 1800s, this steamship was chugging into a harbor and it broke down and stopped working. So they were able to tow it in. And so the captain said, we've got to get to the next port, or we'll be too late with the shipment. So the captain went looking for somebody to repair the ship. So he's asking around, who's the best repair person around here? And they all gave him the same guy. So he went and he found this guy, and he asked the guy to come fix the ship. And the guy said, okay. The guy goes down the bowels of the ship, and there's all these pipes and fittings and stuff. The guy's looking around. He pulls out a little hammer and dings on a red valve. And all of a sudden, everything's working again. Then he gives a bill to the captain for $1,000. The captain goes, $1,000? You're insane. You were there for 10 minutes. And give me an itemized bill. So the guy goes, okay, I'll give you an itemized bill. For tapping with a hammer, 50 cents. For knowing where to tap, $999.50. And so I think Steve would always
accuracy,
say, NLP is, with the meta model, with our well-formed conditions, it's really teaching us how to pattern and knowing where to tap to make all the difference.
Yeah.
So that would be one Steve story that comes up for me.
Yeah. And I'm really grateful. And I wish I was there. I would have taken a hug from you.
Yeah, I wish I could give you a hug, but of course now we have 2 meters of distance.
So we have the e-hug.
It's a virtual hug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
so
you.
Good.
Since last summer. And I hope to look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, me too. And best wishes to everybody, all the listeners, and best wishes to everybody in terms of their health and well-being in this pandemic. And stay well. So if the group sees us doing this, it's because we're doing an interview from 9,000 miles or 12,000 miles.
Yeah. In one of the call, there was a client saying something, and I was observing, and I said, and I was really listening to her, and she thought the screen froze, wherein I was actually looking at her. And ever since then, I said, okay, I'll keep doing this.
It's a good idea.
Indeed. So tell me this: you carry the serious look, but I'm sure you're very funny, and you crack your own jokes. But
Really, I don't get that too often. Usually people have the silly one with the lampshade on his head at the party and stuff like that. But yeah, I think having fun's important.
Yeah.
In the late 60s, it was way before all that, but I was still growing up then. But in 78, Well, in the 70s, we kind of had a
That's what
revolution.
I'm saying, you know, you have this amazing way of cracking great jokes, which just gets.
Thank you. What I was going to say is the 70s were really exciting times, I think, at least in America. In the 60s,
Yeah.
we started getting, you know, we had the drug revolution and people started experimenting with LSD, and we had the Beatles and the whole kind of a cultural revolution in America and Europe. But one of the things that was exciting too that came along in the 70s was the whole idea of computers.
Yeah.
And that's where Steve Jobs was in his garage working with Wozniak, I guess his name was. But anyway, they were building these things, and Bill Gates was peddling his software, and it was a very exciting time. And so
There's a lot of things happening in California during that same time, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the same kind of excitement was in the field of psychology with NLP.
Yeah.
It was like brand new. And before, if you go back into the 60s and before the 60s, the main metaphor for doing psychology was like the telephone. So they talk about rewiring.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, we need to get that guy rewired so he quits doing that. But then, of course, with NLP came the idea of reprogramming. That we all have similar hardware, but our software programs, you might have a good one or a bad one, or you might have bugs in your software that need to be tweaked. And
I like the term of Mac, which uses the word during formatting, they use the word time machine. So I think in NLP, many times we go back in time and we install that working condition back in place.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about NLP, you can actually pull up your time machine, go back in time, reorganize it, and bring it forward, and it's all different.
Yeah.
Right?
And be the change you really want to see.
Yeah, it's kind of weird being stuck at home though a lot.
Yeah.
Funny, for example, the last haircut I was able to get was at the end of January.
But you always grow your hair.